Well, that was a very, very exciting discussion on Birmingham and its history and future and all the opportunity. And I think we really saw leadership in action. And I don't know how many of you at the break were able to talk to some of the panelists, but I think not only are they so optimistic, we talked about, coming back sooner than later and seeing the progress. So that is clearly sets us up for a very exciting discussion on sharing really practices, initiatives that are around the world on placemaking innovation. We all know that for some years, people around the world have said, well, we want to create the next Silicon Valley, even naming it after a specific place based on a technological revolution, the microchip and the impact it had on the digital revolution. But what's really occurring, and again, this is a great theme for today and in reality, is that there are many models that are emerging around the world on how you really bring all the components together of talent, technology, investment, and infrastructure to build on the assets of a place, its history, its historical basis, its culture, its opportunities, but then, to have a vision of where to go in the future. And so we're going to discuss that again with it's a great panel of leaders. But there was something I did want to share. It was in my background materials, and I thought it's relevant because we're talking about how communities connect all the dots, bring everyone together. Yes, universities as an anchor, as a fulcrum, as a catalyst, but also civil society, government policymakers, industry leaders, entrepreneurs. But government policy matters, and it matters how we all shape that. And so, when you look at the decline of Birmingham from being the center of the creation of the Industrial Revolution, what went on? Well, the simplistic answer is, it was global competition, people making things cheaper, better, other parts of the world. But the government at the time played a very important role in policies that actually in many ways put a knife in the ground for what happened to Birmingham in the latter part of the 20th century. And I just want to share what that was, because our colleague Rob Valentine on the panel and others did a very good job of talking about growth and why growth matters and how it has to be sustainable. And it's a balance between growth. And if you don't have growth, you're not going to have economic opportunity or job creation. So I just thought I'd share this with you because it's relevant to all of us who work with our government in the policies that shape placemaking innovation and the role of universities therein. So the Distribution of Industry Act of 1945 and 1946 in the West Midlands Plan, it was commissioned by the Minister for Town and County Planning, which set, this is really interesting, population targets that were less than the current population of Birmingham at the time. They did not want any population growth, and they set limits on that, coupled to restrictions on physical growth, limiting the ability of land to be used. So you have two very anti-growth policies, controlling the number of people and the amount of physical land, restraining growth of people and new industries. And then you couple that, of course, what happened as a result of that? Huge increase in land prices, labor shortages, there weren't people to work, escalating wages, over-specialization in one industry, which of course at the time were the autos. And then on top of that, all the union discord. And so all of that came to be kind of a perfect storm that led to a lot of the decline in the industrial capacity and wealth and power of this area. So I mention that because we're each going to talk in our respective cases, as it were, about this balance of, yes, the role of the universities here is a major theme, but the role of government, federal governments, local governments, including regional governments, of how they can either be what we would say innovation friendly or innovation hostile. So with that, let's turn to this great panel. We have a surfeit of Richards here. I'm going to introduce first Professor Sir Ian Greer, who's the President and Vice Chancellor of Queen's University of Belfast, a very distinguished medical doctor. I think you all have the bios, and had a great career before he was stolen away from University of Manchester to be, where are you buried, in Queens. Dr. Mishinari Hamaguchi, the Director General of Japan's Strategic Center of Biomedical Advanced Vaccine Research and Development for Preparedness and Response, known as SCARDA. I've had the pleasure and honor to know and work with Dr. Hamaguchi-san for many years. He was the president of Nagoya University, a great center of innovation in Japan, but also the head of Japan Science and Technology Agency, which in the United States is the equivalent of our National Science Foundation. So played the major role in all the research and development investments in Japan. And we're very, very honored that he's a distinguished fellow of the GFCC and a member. We have our new member, Professor Damon Salisa, the Vice Chancellor of New Zealand's Auckland University of Technology. Thank you for being with us. Professor Ken Sloan, the President of UK's Harper Adams University, another Aussie that's been brought back to the mother country, as it were, and a very interesting university in agriculture and the green and economy and innovative. And then Dr. Martha Hoover, the Vice President of the Knowledge Enterprise Initiatives at Arizona State University. And ASU is a very active member of the GFCC and, of course, the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, and very innovative university. So let's start with you, Professor Greer. Really, what, in your role as Vice Chancellor of Queen's, one of the great research universities, I mean, medical sciences and materials in almost every dimension, you're at the heart of Belfast, which again was one of our great innovative cities in the world, and you're dealing with many challenges there, both social, political, economic. Northern Ireland, I think, has the biggest economic challenges in the UK. Share with us what you're doing really to lead the whole initiatives around the Belfast Innovation Initiative and the role of Queen's therein.
Well, thank you, Deborah. That's a very big question for me to cover, but I'll do my best to summarise it. Belfast, like many Western cities, was going through a transformation away from heavy industry into a knowledge-based economy, which was largely driven by the university's expertise and strengths. We had the opportunity through an initiative called the Regional Growth Fund, where government would put money into cities where there was potential to try and drive the economy. We had the opportunity to lead that on the innovation part of the deal. And we led, from a Queen's perspective, in 3 big centres, one in advanced manufacturing, one in health research, and one in data and digital. Now, these were all built on the strengths of the university, where we could offer something special that would be attractive globally. And cybersecurity, for example, is a really big draw in Belfast, where we're the #1 location for American FDI across the globe in cyber. Massive growth there, all fueled by the university. But the other areas are important too. So when we were looking at the city deal, it was critical that we married up the strengths of the university with the strengths and the needs of the economy. There was no point in having an initiative that didn't resonate with what the economy wanted or needed or was capable of delivering. So that alignment was key. Although there was no funding for skills within this development, we felt it was important to have a skills component of the Belfast Region City deal to make sure we had the skills going forward to do that. Now, to achieve all that, we had to work across multiple sectors, because these initiatives were not university facilities that we were developing. They were run by the university, but they were actually there for business, largely for the SME market, so that they could come in, develop their new products or new services and facilities they wouldn't otherwise have had access to. So these are effectively shared facilities, but run and operated by the university. And that's a good model. But it meant that we had to reach out at multiple levels. On my level, I had to reach out to the chief executive of the city council, to politicians, to business leaders, and the people throughout the leadership structure had to do that with their opposite numbers across these sectors. When you work with multiple sectors, you have to be patient and tolerant. The civil service does not work at the same pace as a private industry or a university. And you have to let all the partners see that they won't gain every time there's a project. Projects have differential impact on various players, But across multiple projects, everyone wins, and across the whole of the innovation area, if you like, that then leads to a rising tide, and you get a positive feedback of growth. So you've got to be patient and recognise everyone can't go at the same pace, and you have to be inclusive and help them do that. So from my perspective, I had to make sure that entrepreneurship was part of my leadership. Having deep connections to key leaders in politics and industry and business was also key. And having that patience and tolerability to still encourage people to get to that end point and not lose patience because we're going at such a slow rate. And sometimes that was difficult because the rate was glacial on occasions, but we hung in there, and it took around 6 years to get things finally through to fruition. But now it's shaping up very well. So I guess that's the story in a nutshell, Deborah. Obviously I can expand further, but there's a number of panelists with some fantastic examples to talk about.
Before I leave you, right, and we'll come back, could you share a little bit also on the catalytic role in the innovation that Queen's played in bringing together all the disparate groups, all the interests, all the players that led to the Good Friday Accord and the role of women, because this is also very critical to the placemaking innovation, because people want to now come to Belfast.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to the convening power of universities. And I would say that from my university's perspective, from a Queen's perspective, the thing that differentiates us from other research-intensive universities in the UK is our international convening power. And that's based on our history. Now, it's a troubled history with conflict and divisions across society. We had to learn a lot from how we dealt with that. It's now in the past, but last year we hosted the meeting for the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which led to peace in Northern Ireland after a very long time of conflict. We were able as a university to bring key leaders from across the globe. We had President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, George Mitchell from the US. We had the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen. We had the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We had past Prime Ministers like Tony Blair. We had the Prime Minister of Ireland, Leo Varadkar. We'd had previous Prime Ministers like Bertie Ahern from the South. We pulled all these people together without too much difficulty, other than the logistics of trying to coordinate their diaries. But these people were very keen to come to Belfast to talk about their experience in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That convening power is really important. When you couple that with the anchor institution part of a university, that's very compelling. Many components of an innovation sector come and go or have quite a short time frame. Universities are pretty much permanent. We can withstand the test of time and take people through a difficult and troublesome pathway. So using that convening power, using the fact that we're an anchor institution that's got longevity and that's got facilities and it can put some skin in the game, if you like, we can use that responsibility wisely and really make things happen. So convening power and social responsibility can really drive that economic benefit. Deborah?
And I would just add to that, and this is something that many universities are grappling with all over the world, particularly in the US, but I think here and in the UK and elsewhere, is that you, Queens, in your DNA and culture, somehow you have created a culture of trust. People from all dimensions and sides wanted to come and work with you, and that's a rare jewel, quite frankly.
Well, it was absolutely essential for Queen's during the Troubles. The university couldn't be partisan, couldn't be on anyone's side for a number of reasons. But the most important one was because we were a place that was safe and people could come to Queen's to have very difficult discussions at all sorts of levels, from paramilitaries to senior politicians. We were a warm, welcoming place where you could have difficult conversations. I think that has stood the test of time, and we still offer that at present. And I think Queen's University is a great place to allow those discussions, those initiatives to happen. Very few people, I think, have got that experience, but it's become part of our DNA, partly by necessity. And now that we understand how important it is, undoubtedly, it's there by design.
Thank you. Dr. Hamaguchi-san, you have I know you're going to tell us a lot about what SCARTA's doing and its role with industry and the innovation and how critical that is. And of course, your role at funding universities for the next waves of innovation. But before, you were president of Nagoya. And just share a little bit about, the placemaking innovation in Nagoya and how you, as the president, were the anchor for that in Japan.
In Japan, as a president of Nagoya University, I tried collaboration with companies around that area. For example, Toyota, Denso, they are a huge company. But we have alumni there. I started a communication with our alumni. For example, Toyota Shoichiro, he's a top of the Toyota motor company. This was in Japan somehow very important to make a kind of trust between company and university. Because in Japan, academia and the university has a huge gap. And this gap makes innovation difficult. And what we thought is, for example, if you say long-term effect in university, you imagine 5 years or 10 years to complete. But in company, if it's a long one, 3 years, sometimes 2 years. 1 year is a long-term effect project. So even if we use same word, meaning is different. Even we use same Japanese, meaning is different. So by the communication, we overcome this difference. To overcome it, we now, as a funding agency, we applied one important keyword is under one roof. We offer, for the big project, we offer building in each universities, sometimes 18, 20 universities I'm covering. And under this one roof, we let them collaborate, academic people and industry people. And sometimes the leader of the project we select from company side. And the sub-leader for the research select from academia side. Then we can activate collaboration and communication and make trust. This is the most important thing that I experienced.
The trust, yes.
Trust.
So turning to SCARTA, we'd love to hear about your new Center for Innovation and how universities are so much an integral part of that, and how you're also building into that work some of the, well, not just specific to Japan, but to all advanced economies, the aging issue of people getting older and how they're going to work and be productive and contribute their wisdom and experience to society.
We are living in a rapidly aging society, and I think many things gradually declining. Even if declining, we try to let them in a kind of, sustainable, peaceful, happy system. It's difficult to explain the feeling in English, but anyway, let people feel happy or enjoyable their life. It's okay, even if the number of population declined and aged. We say sometimes in the project, a kind mission-driven one, we select, for example, active aging, active sustainability. Combine the word and design the project under one roof. This is second point we're trying to make it. For vaccine R&D, we're saying similar idea.
We'll come back to some of the things that relate to Japan science and technologies. leadership role in incubating the clusters and the innovation engines at universities in Japan. Turning to you, Ken, and Harper University, tell us about, everyone says you're unique and unusual. Tell us what you are, for those who don't know from around the world, and also what you see the role of this university in this innovation ecosystem and placemaking innovation, and how it compares to what you were doing in Australia.
Really good point. And I'm going to start with Australia, actually, because Melbourne, when people think about Melbourne as a city, they think of a highly livable city. But I was at Monash University, which up until recently did not have any location in central Melbourne. It was in an outer part of the state of Victoria. So despite being the largest producer of growths and high-end growths in the state, it was still seen as a secondary location and a less important location when it came to transport planning and everything else, all those things that we've talked about, which are essential. Now, the Australian government, the state government have done something about that. They're invested long-term in transport, and that's meant that the Monash Technology Precinct, which we started when I was over there, is really at the driving heart of innovation in the life sciences, in engineering, and other places. But the thing about Monash and the thing about Australian institutions is they're very, very big, and they are well connected to each other. I then came over to Harper Adams University. So I've gone from Australia's biggest university to one of the UK's smallest universities. But it's a university with a priority focused on food technology and food production, animal health and well-being, and sustainability. So why is that important? It's important because at the heart of innovation are not just technology, but people, and people need to thrive. They need access to food. Food in the UK, the food production, food sustainability, the whole gamut, is the largest industrial sector of this country. There is no other industrial sector which is larger than it. The other thing that became very, very clear to me, and I think about it in the context of the conversation that we had before, there is a risk when we talk about place-based innovation and the role of cities in place-based innovation that we forget where the rest of the population is. So in the UK, 33 million people are in towns, not cities. 10 million people are in rural communities, not in cities. The minority of people in the UK live in highly centralized cities. So my university lives located in a semi-rural location, but it's right next door to one of the new towns that was created in the UK in the 1960s called Telford. Telford as a population is just slightly smaller than the population of Oxford and slightly smaller than the population of Cambridge. So when you look at it through that lens, you've got to ask yourself the question, why is that population not important to place-based innovation? Because in that group of people in that population are other innovators, are other people who will come up with solutions for the future. And the only slight thing I was going to say about your introduction to Birmingham, Deborah, earlier, is that the actual foundation stone of the Industrial Revolution was in Ironbridge, which is a town just outside Telford. And if you think about the geography of the UK then, the perceived connectivity between Birmingham and Ironbridge was much closer. They were seen as, they created all the materials and then Birmingham did something with it in that regard. So our job, what we've done, is we're looking as a university through two lenses. How do we create innovation cycles within the rural communities? So we've established a thing which is called the School of Sustainable Food and Farming, which is a collaboration between our university plus McDonald's, we heard about before, plus a major supermarket, plus a range of other organisations. And what we've created is a sustainability network across all rural communities in the UK to ensure that new models of food production, new models of animal husbandry are developed and shared rapidly across those different areas. So that is a different type of densification. It's an industry densification as opposed to a place-based densification. In Telford itself, what we've done is we've created a new digital hub right next door to the railway station. It's only 6 miles away from the university, but if you look at the two locations, they might as well be 100 miles apart, because one is very rural, one is very normal town-centred. In that one building, we have got not only a university, but we've got a further education college, a community college. We've got a startup ecosystem. We've got the investment arm of the local government. We've got the local government in the area. And we've also got our local national politicians in that building as well. And why have we done that? Because in Telford, the biggest difference between somewhere like Cambridge and Telford is that the population is underskilled, it's low aspiration, low achievement, and difficult social outcomes. So what we decided as a university was we had to go to them. Instead of just sitting waiting for them to come to us, we had to go to them. So that's the reason why we've done it. The focus of that base is on advanced skills. So the courses we're teaching there are robotics, automation, mechatronics, digital business, data science. So all of those things that you would expect to see. But I think the test, not only of this panel, but of the debate that we're talking about, is the extent to which the place-based innovation we are talking about genuinely touches the lives and connects to the 33 million people who are not in these cities and the 10 million people who are not in an urban centre at all. And I think that sits behind some of the questions that we were being asked this morning about when we talk about growth and inclusive growth, who are the beneficiaries?
That's really fascinating about the history of Telford and its current economic status. How are you attracting students to the university? The people that live in this area, do they want careers in this space, or do they have aspirations to go elsewhere?
So we've got a rather odd situation where if you have a look at quite a few UK universities, they will have a large group of people from the local area who go and study there. In Harbour Adams, the vast majority of people come from elsewhere. So it is a genuine national, international recruiting institution. The issue that we have is we've got lots and lots of people who should be well qualified to go to university, go into advanced careers, who just don't go in that local area. So it's the overall standards of educational outcomes are significantly lower than they are in the rest of the country. So the first job is to actually get them to see an advanced education and advanced career as being something that's achievable. And that's the reason why we've gone into the community. So instead of, my institution's only been a university for 12 years, but it's been around for 120 years. And it's sat there, and these populations have never collided with it, never connected with it. We've decided that the only way to create that collision, to create that opportunity, is by being physically there. And our first step is to attract them to come into higher levels of education, and then to make sure that they get to the most appropriate destination, even if that is another university.
Well, we'll come back to that with everyone on this issue of ensuring that people who live and are anchored around leading universities have the opportunity also to benefit from that, because I think that is a huge challenge for the sustainability of support for the institutions as well. And I also want to think a little bit about the bioeconomy writ large. So our new member, we're delighted to have you in the council. Professor Salisa, to be a member of the GFCC, and you're the Vice Chancellor of the Auckland University of Technology. And we heard this morning from you some very interesting things about how you're engaging with a more Indigenous population and the innovation around that. Share a little bit first about your university, and then how you see your leadership in the placemaking economy in New Zealand.
Oh, thank you, Shirley. Yeah, so the Auckland University of Technology is New Zealand's second largest university by headcount. We're in our biggest city, and New Zealand, 1/3 of New Zealanders live in Auckland. So it's very centralised in that sense. And we're unique in that we're both a university of opportunity. Over half of our students, like many of us in the room, are first generation university students. Over half our students speak English as a second language, even though English is our primary language of instruction. And we are the only one university in New Zealand where the socio-economic makeup of our university looks like our city. So we're performing that social and economic mission, which we feel delivers that impact to the city and the nation. And then we're also a very international university, and the sort of international part is in our DNA. And I think as well as those things, we're New Zealand's University of Technology. So we're both operating in a diverse, rich environment with a very large cohort of Indigenous students, nearly 15% of our students, and then another group of Pacific students who are non-Indigenous to New Zealand, but are Indigenous peoples from the island Pacific, of whom I'm one of those people originally from Samoa. And so we're serving in a kind of overlapping nested matrix of communities who sort of gather in Auckland. And Auckland is unusual in that it's the most diverse city in the OECD. Half of Aucklanders were not born in New Zealand. You just come into it, you get both a flavour of being in a Pacific city, where the second most spoken language in New Zealand, in Auckland, is Samoan. Also a very Asian city, so South Asian and East Asian in particular. And so part of our drive is to find the innovation that resides in those communities and align it with the work of the university. And a lot of what I've heard this morning is really inspiring, but in New Zealand we often think, we're a long way from even our closest neighbours. I mean, people forget the scale. 1/3 of this planet is the Pacific Ocean. And in fact, a nation where we have many students from, called Kiribati, has the same surface area as Europe. So the distances, the scale is both enormous, and yet people often think of the Pacific as small because there's only 1% of the world's people. But then this incredible diversity, and I've often written about how the diversity of these Pacific nations is unmatched in the world. One Pacific nation, for instance, speaks more languages than Asia, Papua New Guinea. And so in that sort of ferment, the role of a university is quite unique in that it brings together communities who would often otherwise not be together. And so the opportunity to have a creative, innovative environment has a social and economic benefit that's unmatched. And when I was thinking about what's an example of that we're proud of, that speaks to our unique contribution, just coming off what Sir Ian said, in that sort of picture, universities are institutions of the long term. They will be here long after we've gone. And at the same time, we want to do an innovation and impact contribution, which is very much now. And so one of the ones that I think encapsulates that alignment for us is a project we've got, a research project originally called Living Laboratories. What it is the largest urban forest renewal in New Zealand. So it's rebuilding an Indigenous forest in Auckland. It is a partnership and originated with our local tribe, Ngāti Whātua Kiorake. And what we have coming out of that is both the actual project. We're reforesting a primal forest almost in downtown Auckland. We're recovering the knowledge that goes with that. We're using advanced technologies like drone technology, data science to map it and actually deliver sustainable lessons for the future. We're recuperating Indigenous knowledges, but we're also teaching primary school students, so from 5 years up to 18 years, about this work. And now we've produced a model which has been taken up elsewhere. We've gotten significant philanthropic funding to support it. And we've built a relationship with an Indigenous tribe that has long distrusted the university, the city, the colonial institutions. And so all this has been done in a way that's brought on a lot of collective effort, really strong alignment. And then you think, well, what's the immediate impact of it? I mean, it's taken us 15 years to get to tree topping. So the first trees have just grown higher than people. But actually, as part of that, we had to produce a nursery to contribute these trees. Now that nursery is a going concern as a commercial enterprise. It's oversupplying, it's supplying Auckland's gardeners and those, and is actually making a significant profit for the investment to students. So it's those kind of both an immediate impact, a commercial impact, a high technology piece, but also very much grounded in the earth, sustainable, and making the world a better place while we're doing it.
So part of this then is you must be forging and have an ambition to expand strategic partnerships globally in this area and through digital connectivity. I mean, I'm thinking of the forestation challenges in Brazil, you know, in the Amazon, and of course Malaysia, and with palm oil, all these things. Is that an area where you are seeing place-making innovation broader than where your physical footprint is?
A lot of those core partnerships are coming out of the well-being mission that sits behind our forestry bits and the other bits. We're New Zealand's largest health science university, and so our that project actually sits in our Faculty of Health and is actually supporting the well-being of the Indigenous community, as also uplifting that piece around the research, which is the bit that we're taking out to the world. Of course, forests are very local collections of knowledge, and as well as collections of biota. But through our global connection is really through the knowledge and specialization that we've lifted out of that.
And also, I think the theme of trust that we're talking about is running through your work as well.
I think trust is, and I know that we're all thinking about this in our own universities, that as trust becomes almost the essential commodity in an AI world, universities are institutions of trust. And so we have to fight to maintain our position. And you could see it as a social license, but as producing knowledge becomes, or at least producing words and video becomes so easy, producing trust is not. So I think that's hit the nail on the head. As we look for institutions the world can trust in the future, we will increasingly look to universities for that provenance of knowledge, for that deep sort of public debate and the peer review that has been at the heart of the university system globally.
Thank you. Well, Matthew, you have the enviable position of having a leadership role at ASU that is, I think, of many, many American and global universities, one that's gone through tremendous transformation. I mean, I'm dating myself by saying years ago, ASU had a very different reputation than it has today as one of the, yes, most innovative in how you do your work and how you collaborate and the multidisciplinary, but the actual output and impact of ASU, yes, in Arizona and the region, but globally is profound. And so you really are an innovative leader, yes, in place-making innovation, but how universities engage with communities to make all that happen. And we were just, our group of chief technology officers were just out, in February with you and saw what's unbelievably happening at warp speed and the whole semiconductor placemaking rejuvenation and transformation. So that's a lot for you to, but share, from where you're sitting in the knowledge enterprise, what is some of the magic that goes on there to make this placemaking innovation so real and tangible at ASU?
Yes, happy to. So the knowledge enterprise at ASU is really, it's our research arm of the university, but it's more than that. It's where the Vice President of Research Office sits, but it's also where our VP of Entrepreneurship and Innovation sits. It's where our leadership around corporate engagement and strategic partnerships sit. So that's not a whole lot different than how many universities are organizing themselves now. I think what's unique about ASU, and when President Crow, I believe in 2001, became the president, we had the #1 party school title. And now we're 10 years in a row via U.S. News and Reports, the #1 in innovation. So it's quite the contrast. And in a meeting we were in earlier, I said it's really 100% attributed from the very top in the vision of President Crow. You will not see on an ASU website a strategic plan. What you will see is a charter that's focused on inclusivity. It's focused on use-inspired research. It's focused on accountability to the communities we serve. And as you continue to peruse all the programs, you'll see how everything we do ladders up to that. It's an institution where you walk around campus, you could select 10 random people and people know the charter. I've been at 3 other institutions, and quite frankly, I couldn't have iterated what the mission statement was at the time. And so we live and breathe that at ASU. We have 180,000 learners. Half of those are in Tempe. The other half are online, and they're sitting in the same courses that the same people in Tempe are sitting. If someone doesn't get in the first time they apply, we say, here, take these 2 courses. And by the way, you don't have to pay for them unless you use them to apply. And if you get these grades, you have a spot in this class. And so it's that type of innovation around inclusivity. And regarding use-inspired research, we've kind of found our way of convening. There is more resources coming out of the U.S. federal government right now around innovation and technology in regional hubs, semiconductors. For example, we recently won one of the NSF innovation engines. And that was convening University of Utah, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, industry, utility companies around, all about sustainable energy and water solutions in the Southwest. Salt Lake City, Tempe, Las Vegas, some of the fastest growing populations in the country, yes, the most resource constrained cities. So how are we going to wrap our head around what the future looks like? We did the same thing around semiconductors. Phoenix has been building for 20 years to become the hub, one of the hubs in the United States around semiconductors. President Crow had the foresight. We bought a Motorola plant. Motorola left. We purchased. Now we have one of probably the largest and sophisticated university fabrication facilities around semiconductors that any other higher ed institution has. And that's led to partnerships with Applied Materials, the #1 manufacturer of semiconductor producing machines. That's very technical, I know. But it's those types of innovations that I think it's very much find a way to yes mentality. It's very much limited risk aversion as far as making decision. And every single day we're flying the airplane while we're building it. And it's okay if we realize that this isn't working, and we'll back up and we'll try again. So it's really that mentality that I think has led us to where we are as far as being innovative. But where we're really now spending time, and I said this earlier too, is we and many other universities are being trusted with many taxpayer dollars right now to promote these innovative regions of the country. And we still don't know how we're truly going to assess place-based innovation. Is it STEM programming? Is it jobs? Is it patents to commercialization? And then how are we tracking what happens once we're past licensing? And so we're spending a lot of time thinking. We have a faculty member named Marianne Feldman, former NSF. NSF has provided a grant to her to help us think through that, developing logic models to help us assess, is place-based innovation working? So I think we've gotten very good at convening the right stakeholders around challenging problems. We've gotten very good gaining the trust of the funding agencies. And now I think we need to get very good at understanding, are we being effective at that? And then the next step is, how are we going to convince society that these are positive outcomes that influence you, and this is how?
Well, I will share with, a story about Michael Crow. I first worked with Michael years ago when he was in Iowa. And we traveled together to Poland at the end of the Cold War, as it were. We were on a train to Krakow and became friends on that journey. But he was going to succeed me as Assistant Secretary of Commerce. This was some years ago. And he called up and said, he was provost at Columbia. He said, "Do you think I should take this job?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of the emperor or empress with no clothes, because we don't have a budget. It's really just the power of persuasion, to get people to do things." And I said, "But, I think in a few weeks or whatever, months, knowing Michael, you're going to be president of a university." And sure enough, within a few weeks, he was asked to go and be president of ASU. And he's been, everybody's wanted to recruit him. But I'll never forget what he said. He said, "When I get out there, one of the first things I'm going to say is, you don't want to rank a university by how many students it rejects." And at the time, that was a very profound comment, because all the rankings, we have, I'll just throw out a number, 300,000 applications for 50, whatever the numbers are. And he reversed that and yet created excellence, and also created university partnerships where the industry's investing and not just relying on the federal money. And so that's something we have to all think about, because the money, certainly on the US side, is not limitless. And so how do we do the placemaking innovation where we have to bring everybody else, together to fund? And I don't know how much more time we have, Roberto. You'll give me the signal here. But let's just turn back to, you were head of a funding. You had a lot of power. You determined, which universities were getting the grants in Japan.
Symbolic word, I would say, sometimes weakness makes innovation. And sometimes we need crazy people, real crazy people, to overcome the difficulty. Makes impossible to be a possible one, successful one. We need the power of crazy idea. These two things, sometimes we forget. For the first one, I can tell an example. Aomori area is northern part of Japan, heavily snowing area. Sometimes we have 2 meter, 3 meter high snow in one night. And they have shortest longevity. This is their weakness. But this area people, local government, cities, all share same feeling. We have to overcome. Then they started cohort, extensive cohort. And this cohort attract huge number of companies, big companies all over Japan, and donated. And they are now rich. Weakness makes success. This is one example. Another one is the Blue LED. This is a crazy investment. Akazaki Amano is my friend. Amano is still working in Nagoya University. He failed when he was a graduate student. He said he failed more than 1,000 times in same experiment. And one night, his machine was broken because he collected part from the other laboratory. Because they are poor, they made a machine by themselves, by the part discarded from other laboratory. Then one night, because of the machine's failure, they cannot increase the temperature to high 1,200 to make a good condition. If you experience same thing, you will go back home, or you start drinking, or you start hobby. This is a typical general people response. But he had an inspiration at the time. He can try something with low temperature. And I don't explain the detail, but because of the machine failure, he succeeded. This is a true innovation. Now, in Japan, more than 10% of energy consumption decreased because of his invention. But he's still poor.
That's great. So we have a few minutes, and just to conclude in this very rich discussion, I want to ask everyone to think of that continuum between risk and reward. And the reward is, the roles you're all playing in being builders. I don't think anyone on this panel is a blocker. You like to build and accomplish things. So the continuum between risk and reward to accelerate the placemaking innovation of your universities. What would be a big risk you'd like to take, recognizing there'll be many that will say, no, you can't do that. We don't do it this way. What would be something in your respective environments to really push the envelope that while you're still in these leadership roles, you want to try to accomplish? I don't know who wants to go first. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but what would be something that would be, is risky, but the reward is going to be great?
Well, I think for us and for many universities, the key risk is is the license to operate within your own university and investing in your future, where you're taking money out of the business as usual and you're putting it in where you're building the business, to use that language, of the future. And within academic communities, which are diverse, highly expert, but in very finite areas, that runs a real risk for them, where they think you're shifting out of the core business of the university into a bit that isn't. So it's persuading our academic colleagues that this is core business of the university, that we must invest in these areas. And I think that's the risk, but it's also where the reward is. If you don't do the investment, you won't get that reward.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Ian?
Well, I think there's a risk about people. Most of our economies are struggling for the development of a highly skilled workforce. Yet universities reject a lot of people because they don't have the grades. But what are we rejecting? Because we could be selecting on the basis of privilege rather than potential. Because people who get the grades often have a really good educational opportunities while they're at post-primary, secondary school. And I think there's a real risk of us simply admitting on that basis rather than looking at ways to get the potential. Now, of course, if you don't have the right skills in mathematics, it's going to be tough to do an engineering degree. So you can't go there in one step. And I think you need often a two-step model, which means that universities should talk to further education. In Australia, it would be the TAFE type system. But I think we need a greater articulation between further and higher education to open the door to widening participation and truly start to recruit on the basis of potential and not privilege, because we can't afford to lose large numbers of students from our workforce. We actually need them to grow the business, as it were. And I think we've got to challenge the traditional university entrance model of Oxbridge type grades across a narrow range of subjects and go for an assessment system that looks at the overall potential. Because these students do very well. I said earlier at the meeting today, we recruit students from a very low socioeconomic background, around 30% of them in Queen's University, but their outcomes are better than students from a middle class environment. They have a higher proportion of first and 2-1 degrees, and they've got a lower dropout rate. So I think that gives a measure of the fact that these people can develop significant learning gain given the right opportunities. So that's a risk. I'm not sure that anyone's willing to take it yet in the sector, but it's one I think we should challenge ourselves with.
Maybe you should hire the talent scouters and recruiters for English football, because they've got it figured out how they find the talent at an early age.
I think I'm going to feed on the back of that. And it partly goes back to the way Alex introduced the modern progressive institution. I think we just need to delete the current model of league tables. I think they are self-referencing. They are self-enforcing. I can say that with the luxury of being in a university that league tables don't know how to measure. So they only know how to measure things of a particular scale and a particular type. And I think too many universities are focused on those type of league tables in their decision making. And I think there's an opportunity for universities to re-establish what their concordate is in terms of what their purpose is, but more importantly, who that purpose is for. And for as long as we are trapped in a model, which is about conventional models of measuring through the way in which we are doing it, we won't achieve anywhere near as much as we could.
Thank you. And of course, risk and reward is in the culture, I think, of ASU. So saved you for last, Matthew. And what is something you want to do in the knowledge enterprise that's even pushing the envelope farther?
You know, when it comes to innovation around technology research, I don't think I've proposed a wacky idea to leadership at ASU yet in the last 3 years that every time it's like, yes, look into it, you know. So I don't have anything there, but I think, you know, eye-opening series of events in the United States over the last couple of days, right? And I said we have 180,000 learners, but what about 180,000 more that maybe aren't destined to a higher education, but are our labor force, our trades workforce? We have to find a way to reach more people and make sure people are understanding the contributions we as higher education are making to society. And I just don't think we're doing that well. So I don't know what it looks like and how you do it, but we need to innovate as far as how we're communicating our impacts and how it's touching every single individual in a community. It's not just the ones that may or may not be destined to the university. It's the ones that may never be destined to the university. But how can higher education lean into that side? Maybe it's partnering with community college. Maybe it's partnering with trades organizations. I don't know what it looks like, but it's very evident in the United States that our message of what investments by the government are doing are not reaching the masses as far as their effectiveness.
And they're the people living in places that are making their lives with their families. Well, thank you. This was all fantastic discussion, and congratulate you all on your leadership and for joining us. And I know most of us will be together in Belfast to continue under your leadership next week, Sir Ian. So thank you. And I think we're going to have lunch now.